Welcome. In this course, we'll learn to work with an API to collect data and use this as a foundation for building a web app from scratch. This is an essential skill if you want to gain access to data from the most popular websites. For example, you could look at social data from Twitter, track job listings on LinkedIn, pull headlines from the New York Times, and even get real-time weather updates from AccuWeather. For this course, we'll be working with the popular classified ad site, Craigslist, and build a web app using their apartment listing data. In this video, we'll cover the basics of what we'll be learning and go over the app we'll be building. But first, let me mention that this course does require having some familiarity with Ruby on Rails. We are building a web app after all. I'm going to assume that this isn't the first time you've built a web app, but if you're new to working with code, or if you find yourself in over your head, I recommend taking a step back and going through one of the beginner-level base Rails courses first. Okay. So first, I want to provide some context to make sure you'll be learning the right skills. If you want to gain access to data on the internet, there are two different approaches. The first approach is to write a computer program that can find and grab useful pieces of information on a web page. This is essentially the same process as if we were to visit a URL and manually copy-paste the data we wanted into a spreadsheet. The difference is that by using the speed and power of a computer, we can scan many pages very quickly. This approach is called web scraping or screen scraping. This won't be something we cover in this course, but I recommend learning it at some point because it can be used on almost any website on the internet. The second approach to gain access to data is by using an API. This is the skill we'll be learning here, and it's useful only for sites that have an API available. Fortunately, more and more popular sites are creating their own APIs for developers to use. In other words, they wanted to make the data available to the public and created an official process for developers to make requests. For example, Amazon created an API to allow access to the trove of product information. In doing so, they've made it much easier to build apps around this data, which ultimately drives more traffic to their site. Now, these APIs aren't always free, as we can sometimes be charged a fee, especially for valuable or hard to find data. But in general, it's best to use an API when one exists and rely on screen scraping only as a backup plan. In this course, we're going to use an API to collect data from Craigslist. This is a really interesting case because despite the popularity of their site, Craigslist does not have their own API. Instead, we'll be using third-party 3taps API as an alternative. 3taps will serve as a good, real-life example to give us practice on how to read unfamiliar documentation and explore a new dataset. Using 3taps, we'll be focusing on Craigslist's apartment listings that are available for rent in Brooklyn. We're going to take the data we retrieve, store it in a database, and build a web app around it. By having control over the data ourselves, we'll be able to build our own user interface and provide custom features that may not be available on Craigslist itself. A good example of the kind of site you can build with this approach is www.padmapper.com. PadMapper has become a popular alternative to Craigslist for finding apartment rentals. It takes Craigslist apartment listings and overlays them onto Google Map to create an improved apartment browsing experience. This just goes to show that once you have control over the data yourself, there's really no limit to how you can present the information to your users. Let's now go over the app that we'll have built by the end of the course. We'll be creating an apartment rental site for Brooklyn, New York by collecting the most recent posts from Craigslist and building a nice UI around the data we've gathered. First, we'll collect the data through the 3taps API and store the information in a database. We'll then display this data on a web app we'll build in Rails. When users first get to our homepage, they'll be able to filter their apartment search by different categories, such as price, number of bedrooms and bathrooms, square footage, and so on. Let's try it out now. We'll search for 2-bedroom listings in the Brooklyn neighborhood of Williamsburg. We'll get taken to a search results page with all the apartments that match the filters we've set. Here, we'll be able to see a preview of what the apartment looks like, as well as some general information about each one. If we click on a post, we can see the images that were uploaded, the details that we gathered, and the description. Finally, after building the app, we'll automate the data collection process to run every 10 minutes so that our content will be updated automatically. Okay, in the next video we'll get started by exploring the 3Taps API for the first time.